Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome back to some more Pokemon action. I'm your host Ryan, and today we're going to continue the Learning Competitive Guide and finish off talking about breeding. Today I want to talk about IV, or individual values. These are extra numbers that are added to the base stats during the breeding process that can come in somewhere between the range of 0 and 31. What we shoot for while we're breeding are perfect IVs. Now, perfect IVs come in two forms. 31 is the go-to perfect stat. If you can get a 31 in all of your stats, you are golden. The other perfect stat is 0. Now, 0 is considered perfect in only very specific scenarios. For example, if you have a special attacker such as Gengar, and you're very into the competitive scene, a 0 in attack is very good because attacks like Foul Play are super effective against Gengar and also take advantage of their attack stat. So by getting a 0 in attack, you're diminishing that attack's power. 0 is also perfect if you're playing a Trick Room team, something that we'll cover in a later video, as a 0 in speed will make sure that you're one of the fastest Pokemon on the field, and that'll make sense to you in later videos. But generally speaking, you do want to aim for that 31. So how do you know if you have a 31? Because before we get into breeding, you need to know how to get there. Well, to start off with, you're going to want to find your game's stat judge. X and Y has one, and so does Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. What's important about these stat judges is that they have specific phrases to tell you whether or not your stats have 31 or 0. The thing about it is that there's a lot of different phrases and each game has it ever so slightly differently, so I highly recommend you following the link in the description down below in order to find out what the judge in your specific game specifically says. However, there's a bit of a curveball. The stats judge, for everything that isn't 0 and 31, he'll give you just a general phrase that only tells you what the range is. You may be asking yourself, well Ryan, if we're shooting for perfect stats, why do we need to know if it's not 31 or if it's not 0? Well, here's the only reason you should ever concern yourself about not getting a 31 or a 0. Hidden Power. Now, Hidden Power is a very unique attack. It's a special attacking move, so you generally won't see it on physical attackers. However, its type is normal, but you can never use it as a normal type attack. And I'll explain. You see, Hidden Power, its typing is actually determined by your IV spread. The best thing you can do is follow the link down in the description below to see exactly what IVs correlate to which type. What's interesting about Hidden Power is that IVs with their different numbers will correspond to different typings. So for example, follow the link and look for the ice type in the chart at the bottom of the screen. What you'll notice is that it says, okay, you want 31 in HP, you want 31 in attack, you want 31 in defense, you want 31 in special attack, you want 31 in special defense, and what's this? You want 30 in speed. So Hidden Power is built off of whether or not specific stats have an IV that's even or odd. And this is why you can't use the stats judge for this, because he only gives you a range. You'll never be able to find out what specific stat you have in the speed, and you'll never know if you have Hidden Power Ice. The best way to approach this is to use an IV calculator, which is linked in the description below. And before we get into how to breed for perfect IVs, I want to show you how the internet generally displays IV spreads. So as you can see on the screen, it says 31/x/31/31/31/31. Now, let's explain this. So, the stats are labeled in order from HP, attack, defense, special attack, special defense, and speed. So obviously when you see a 31, that means that you want a 31 IV in that specific stat. However, the X might throw you off a little bit. The X is simply there to say that it really doesn't matter what you put in here, just as long as you have an IV, which you automatically get every time. So just just remember that. That's just what that means. And if you ever see someone putting IV spreads on the internet or on forums or, anywhere, that's usually what they mean. So, that all out of the way, how do we get these perfect stats? Well, there's a few different options. So for starters, any Pokemon caught in the Friend Safari in X and Y, or through the Dex Nav in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, they're guaranteed to have a few perfect IVs. I will note, however, that I never use the Dex Nav, so I don't have a way to tell you how to use it, so that's something that you should look up for yourself, but do note that it's not necessary or crucial to use in order to get the stats you need. So what would be another way? Well, probably one of the easiest ways to approach this is to just find online a perfect Pokemon to partner with. Usually you can find a bunch of 6IV Ditto online, and if you can get your hands on one of them, this entire process will be super easy. If you can't, maybe you have a friend who already plays competitive, and maybe they can lend you a partner Pokemon. But for the most part, the most common way to approach breeding for IVs is to simply drop the Pokemon in after you've done all of the other steps, such as egg moves, natures, and abilities, and just keep breeding until you get a 31. You see, it takes a 1 in 32 chance to get a perfect stat, and while that might seem very not in your favor, it's still very possible. So, if you start off with one perfect IV, you just bred for maybe 2 hours, let's just say, and you got a perfect IV in speed, right? How do you take that single speed at 31 and make it so the rest of your stats are 31? Well, if you only have the one perfect IV, the best way to approach the second perfect IV is to use a power item. What are power items? Well, power items pass down specific stats. So let's take our Gengar as an example. We just bred out all of our Gengars and it has all the abilities, the natures, and the egg moves that we want. So now we're starting IV breeding. So we breed for a little while and eventually a Ghastly comes out with a 31 in speed. So what we do is we take that Ghastly, we throw it into the daycare. So we take the original Gengar out and now we put the Ghastly in. So Ghastly, we now attach the Power Anklet. Now this will guarantee that the next egg and all subsequent eggs from this Ghastly will always have a 31 in speed. So that's what you do when you have one IV. You do that, and then once you get the 31, you slap on the corresponding power item, and from there, you keep breeding again until you get 2 31 IV. Now we have 2 IVs. Or, if you're one of the lucky people, you started out with a parent Pokemon that already had more than one perfect IV. So how do we get those to pass along? Well, from here on out, you'll be using an item called the Destiny Knot. Destiny Knot will pass 5 of the parent Pokemon's IVs down, guaranteed. Now, you need to understand something about Destiny Knot, and this is something that I never knew until recently because I didn't even think about it. The 5 IVs that are passed down are not passed down from the holder, they're passed down by both the holder and the other parent Pokemon. So if you are breeding a Gengar that already has 6 IVs, but it has the nature, and you have a Ditto but it doesn't have the nature, you can put an Everstone on the Gengar and put the Destiny Knot on the Ditto, and the Destiny Knot will take from the entire pool of 12 IVs. And this is the only way to breed multiple IVs. Obviously, the 5 IVs that are chosen from both parents are random, but it's a lot better than using the power anklets and randomly hoping, because you can only pass down 1 IV at a time. So the Destiny Knot passing down 5 will mean that it just eventually works out. So what you do in this scenario is we have Ghastly with one perfect IV in speed. So we swap that Ghastly in. So now we have Ditto with Timid and an Everstone, and a Ghastly with 31 speed and a power anklet. So we breed these two until we get, let's just say, a Ghastly with a guaranteed 31 speed, and now it has a 31 in special attack. So now we take the Ghastly with 31 in special attack and speed, and we replace the original Ghastly with the new Ghastly. So now we have a Ditto with Everstone and Timid, and we have a Ghastly with 31 in special attack and speed. So now we put the Destiny Knot on the Ghastly. Every time we breed, there's a chance that we'll not only get both the 31 in special attack and the 31 in speed, but let's just say the next egg we breed now also has a 31 in special defense. That's pretty sweet. So what we do is we take that Ghastly and we replace it with the other Ghastly, and now we have a Ditto with an Everstone and Timid, breeding with a Ghastly with 31 in speed, special attack, and special defense. So basically you keep repeating and replacing until eventually you'll get the same amount of IVs. Now breeding for IVs is quite the process. It really is, especially if you don't start off with a Pokemon with 6 IVs. So what I really suggest is just go online and find someone with a 6 IV Ditto. It's gonna make your life so much easier because you're already starting with the 6 IVs. The Destiny Knot will happen. You still have to do the replace and repeat technique because you're gonna have to build up the 31 IVs in both Pokemon. So your Ditto may have 31 perfect IVs, but your Ghastly doesn't. So you want to keep replacing it because it will increase the odds of getting every stat in 31, and you just want to keep replacing it, replacing it, replacing it, and eventually you'll get the 6 IVs. But basically, that's breeding for IVs. It's really long, it's really tedious, it's very stupid, but there's some very good news. It turns out in Pokemon Sun and Moon, they are adding a new feature where you can influence IVs outside of breeding, and it's great. The problem with it is that we don't really know how it works. We know we have to use an item to change the IVs, but we don't know how common these items will be. We don't know how easy it will be to use these items. We don't know anything about that. So for the time being, learn yourself some breeding, learn yourself some IVs, and by God, get yourself a 6 IV Ditto. If you guys can't find it, I will do my best to supply, but there's so many that I can supply, I would have to clone it, but I am here for you guys if you need some help. You also don't need to be using Dittos, remember that. If you remember from the last video, you can breed with a male and a female. Just as long as the female is what you're breeding for, the male can be anything that's compatible. So if you have a friend that has a perfect Dusclops, a perfect male Dusclops with 61 IVs across the board, and you're breeding a female Gengar, you can borrow that Dusclops for breeding and it will help you immensely. So yes, it's tedious, but it is ever so important, and I highly recommend you learn this because we don't know exactly how it will be changed in Sun and Moon. So that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I hope to catch you guys at the next episode. Peace.